Made the two big ones the other night.
National championship is in the balance. 13 seconds left. Florida leads it by 2.
Uzan got to go.
Uzan, give it up. Cryer, 6 seconds, 5 seconds. Sharp.
He walked. He can't touch it.
He can't. 1 second. And it's over. Florida is back on top of the college basketball world. Championship madness. It's a great day to be a Gator.
A great day to be a Gator. Florida back on atop of the college basketball world, as they called. And at that point, Alex Condon was on the floor after a loose ball, which helped secure the title for the Florida Gators. His father, Damian, of course, a 3-time Premiership player with the East Fremantle Sharks, was there to witness it, and he joins us on the show now. Damian, welcome.
Thanks, Duff. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you, mate. Have you come down off that high yet?
I have. However, it was incredible. I've got back here and got a little bit of sleep back in the tank as well. So, it was an amazing journey and went for a whole month. So, good to be home though.
So, paint the picture for us. March Madness. Describe it for us and the size of the tournament and the interest it generates.
So when I got there, he played in his SEC tournament. So that was a knockout tournament as well. That was the Southeastern Conference, which is his conference. His conference has 16 teams, and 13 of them made March Madness. And so March Madness is the top 65 teams in the country from all different conferences playing off to see who's the best team in the country, and basically they get seeded as they go through the year. They earn points on the ranking, and they get seeded, and the top 65 teams play off in March Madness.
How big is the event? I read somewhere like talking about crowds of 60,000. Is that right?
Yeah, so the last couple of games, Stuff, they had 63,000 in San Antonio. So the Final Four was San Antonio. The Gators played Auburn. Auburn went from the SEC conference as well. And Auburn finished on top of Alex's team, the Gators, in the sort of home, what we would call home and away. But Alex's team knocked them off in the SEC conference, which was in Nashville. SEC tournament, which was in Nashville in the first week of sort of the month that I was over there. So that was pretty awesome. And so so Alex's team became the SEC champions, and then rolled into March Madness, which is sort of like a 3-week tournament on the back of that, and that's all over the country. So I first went to North Carolina, and I played 2 games there. It's all knockout. So as soon as they get beaten, they're out. But Alex's team, the Gators and Auburn, Duke, and Houston, the team they played in the final, were all 1 seed. So basically, they play seeds that are down in the 60s and 50s, and to start with. So they receive a 1 seed ranking, and then so they're favoured to win. And all the 4 1 seeds made the Final Four, which was in San Antonio in the end. So I travelled to North Carolina. They played 2 games there. They won both of those, and we crossed the country and went to San Francisco. They played 2 games there. They won those, and then we went to San Antonio, Texas. And they played Auburn in what we would call a prelim final. And they beat Auburn, came from behind to beat Auburn in front of about 60,000 in a football stadium with a roof in San Antonio. And then they played Houston, got themselves about 12 points down, sort of halfway through the second half. Sort of hearts in throat sort of stuff, and but they and Houston were the number 1 defensive team in the country, so it was pretty big. To be down by 12 points was a fair margin at that stage, but they came back, and I think they were in front by like 1 minute and 4 seconds for the whole game out of the 40 minutes, but that happened to be at the end, so they won it. It was unbelievable.
So, what sort of game did Alex have in the final, and what were you thinking when he was the one going after the loose ball that was going to secure the title for the Gators?
Yeah, look, he started. He hurt his ankle during the season, and he had sort of 3 or 4 weeks out, and it was his ankle was quite swollen and quite sore, and then he hurt it again in March Madness about 3 games out. So he wasn't at his, he wasn't 100% sort of towards the end of the tournament. He'd hurt the same ankle again, so he was having some issues with it, and so he came into the Houston game and he played well in the other games. He'd done his job, but he hadn't started, and so he came in early. He shot the first 4 points of the game in the final, which we all sat down, and I sat down and took a big deep breath and was happy and stopped stressing out so much. And so he did that, and then he made a couple of mistakes. He made a couple of travels and turned the ball over once or twice as well. So the stress levels were growing again. But then, in the second half, they got themselves down at half time, and as I said, they were 12 points down, I think about 8-10 minutes to go. He started, really playing well, doing his job, and he does a lot of work in the paint, under the ring, and he does a lot of work rebounding and offensive and defensive rebounding, giving that to his shooting guards. The Gators had 3 really good shooting guards in his team, all seniors, boys in their last year, and they hadn't played that well, particularly their number 1 player. He got double teamed, and so they sort of came together as a team, and Walter Clayton Jr., their shooting guard was feeding it on the inside to the bigger guys. So Alex ended up with 12 points and about 7 rebounds, but really, it was a real team effort. So very exciting and a great outcome in the end.
What's the next move for Alex? He's been talked about as a draft prospect now for the NBA. What does he do next?
So he's got an agent now in America. So we did that when we were over there. We found an agent. He goes into a pre-draft process now. He goes to live in LA for 3 weeks with his agency. You put him up in a house with a few other boys that they've recruited as well. He's got a couple of mates from Australia, I think, going over. Maybe Ben Henschel from here, who he's very good. He's good mates with Ben, and went to the RAS with Ben. Alex Tui, I think, is going to be there as well, who's with the Sydney Kings, and so they're going to go to LA, and they spend 3 weeks basically getting ready for the draft combine. So they're in house. They're getting trained with strength and conditioning coaches and all that sort of thing, and getting ready for the draft combine, which is early May in Chicago. And so he goes up there. It's a bit like the AFL combine where the clubs vote. And you'll be able to tell me better than me, Duff, on this. But if the clubs vote for the players to come along and attend the craft combine, yep. I think there's 70, 80 guys from around the world that get brought in from the NBA. They go to this draft combine in Chicago, and they basically spend a week there doing drills, and the NBA scouts are all there watching him. He goes into that with all the other boys, and then they get feedback from the NBA clubs. So the NBA clubs will say, righto, you're not ready to be drafted, or we'll draft you in the second round, or we'll draft you in the first round, or you need to go back to college, or or we're not going to draft you at all. So they get feedback from the clubs, and back, either they stay in the draft at that point, or they pull out and they go back to college. So that's an option as well.
What's the feeling? Do you think he'll be in the NBA next year, or do you think he'll be back at college?
I don't know at this stage. He's really, he's my son, so I'm probably a bit biased, but he's just surprised everyone. Alex, he's really done well with his basketball. He went to the AAS, and he was probably the last person to get a scholarship there. And then he's gone to America, and he was a project, for the Gators, and he's ended up being one of their better players. And I've got a lot of belief in him, what he can achieve. But he's certainly, he's only 20. He's only in his second year. There's certainly parts of his game that he can work on, and he's working on. So, he could go back to college, and go back there and develop his game. He's very comfortable at college. Obviously, they've just won the national title, so he's got a decent profile there, and they look after him well. He's been there 2 years. He's got some good friends there and teammates as well. So he could certainly go back to college, develop his game, and then see if he could get drafted in the top round the following year. So we'll see what happens. Yeah, it's a bit of a judgment call.
Obviously, the other side of Alex's sporting story is that he's a Category B rookie at Collingwood. Am I right in saying that? I know he's at Collingwood in some sort of rookie category. What's the feeling on that? Is that just parked and just give the basketball career everything and then see where it sits in a year or two? Or is that still sort of front of mind in terms of what he may or may not want to do sporting-wise?
So, sorry. He, before he went to America, Alex had obviously he didn't go in the draft, the AFL draft. He went to the AS because he got the scholarship there in his AFL draft year. So he spent 18 months there, but the AFL clubs are very keen on him, potentially in the future, if things didn't work out in America, that he could come back and play in the AFL as a ruckman. And so, basically Collingwood, who've been absolutely fantastic, have stepped up and given him a Rookie B contract. He's got a 5-year Rookie B contract with Collingwood. He signed, and he's so we're just going to see what happens with his. This was negotiated a couple of years ago with Collingwood.
Yep.
And signed recently, so it's a bit of an out of the box one because he is an Australian boy, and Rookie B contracts are normally for people from other sports, from other countries, and that sort of thing. So it took a while for the AFL to sort of ratify it, but it's come through, and both parties have signed it. So he's got an agreement with Collingwood. It was on the premise that that things didn't work out in America in regards to the NBA, and he can come back and play with the Pies. We both, Alex and I, are mad Collingwood supporters anyway, so he's very happy with that. The guys at Collingwood are his friends with him on Instagram and all that sort of stuff, and so he'd be very comfortable there. We visited the club a number of times. Alex spent a few days at the club last year at Collingwood. And so, and the coaches have been to America to see him, spend time with him in America. So there's certainly a very good relationship with Collingwood. But, we're just sort of waiting to see what happens. And so at Collingwood, they're completely open about it. Obviously the NBA is a pretty big world forum, and he's to get drafted into the NBA would be amazing. However, it's only 65 boys a year from around the world to get drafted in the NBA, so it's not an easy thing to achieve. So I guess everyone's having a bet both ways, and that's but we've got a very good relationship with Collingwood.
There is a WA team that could certainly use a ruckman at the moment, Damian. If everything falls through, I can guarantee you, the boys in blue and gold would be very happy to have Alex on board as a future prospect.
I thought you were talking about East Fremantle, Doug. So good friends with Adrian Bromwich, who's the CEO down there, and they need a ruckman too at the moment. So that's what I thought you remembered too. But yeah, no. I bet they do.
Hey, congratulations. You must be a very proud dad. You're a very fine sportsman in your own right, but that is absolutely fantastic and a great achievement for Alex, and hopefully it's onwards and upwards from here.
Thanks, Duff. I appreciate it, and everyone else's interest in him as well and support. It's been amazing. So thank you very much.
Damian Condon, the father of Alex Condon, of course, recently minted NCAA champion with the Florida Gators. We'll be back with more after the news.